Welcome to the Calpart Bros podcast. I'm your host, Terrence, and with me is my co-host, Jason, calling in for the Back Cave in Indianapolis. Jason, how are you, my good man?
I'm doing very well, sir. It's the anniversary episode. It's our anniversary.
Just
That's
stop.
right, folks. Hey. If I want to sing on my show, I'm going to sing on my show, sir. And the time felt right. It's our anniversary. So I had to sing that famous Tony song. There it is. But hey, I'm doing pretty well, sir. I'm pretty good in good mood, obviously. So let's get into it.
Yes, sir. For the uninitiated, thank you for listening. This is episode 53 of the Calpart Bros podcast. For the uninitiated, Calpart Bros is the podcast to hear. We are weekly podcast fans of current events, sports, and entertainment.
That's right, folks. And as always, we're your hosts, Terrence and Jason. And every single Thursday, we bring to you a brand new episode where we discuss the current events of the day, sports, and the athletes we love.
And even some of the athletes we loathe. No matter the topic, you expect a brutally honest and fun exchange of snark while learning through the lens of our 30 years of friendship that originated in Calumet Park, Illinois.
And folks, for more Cal Park Bros content, make sure you connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok under the handle Cal Park Bros or Cal Park Bros Podcast for more behind the scenes of the show and just to engage with us every single day. But please do not forget, as I always say, that the Cal Park Bros Podcast is available to listen and subscribe for free wherever you, your family, the whole household, your neighbors, everybody can listen to the podcast.
Like us, love us, share us, follow us. And folks, if you like us, hell, why wouldn't you?
That's right, folks. Like Terrence said, we are the podcast to hear and watch. So make sure you're living it, loving it, and doing it.
Yes, sir. All right. So, first segment, we're kicking off the show. CPB is 1 year old, baby. And what a year it's been, Jason. I think we've we've learned a lot. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but also we've had a lot of big moments. And so, well, first thing I think you and I were talking about as we've embarked on this for over a year is that, what are some of your favorite moments from the show? Now that we've been at this for a year, favorite shows, favorite segments, like what are standout moments to you now that we've been at this for at least 12 months?
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, hopefully this isn't too cliche, but my favorite episode is, for me, episode number one. First of all, a few things here. So, against our first episode, it's the birth of the show, so that makes it important there. Also, and I think we said this before on the show, is that episode, if people go back and listen to it, that episode wasn't meant to be our first episode, right, Terrence? That we recorded that with the idea that was going to be our trial run, like an experiment to kind of get things right before we actually did our first episode. And we recorded that on whatever day it was. And then I think like the next day or whatever, Terrence said, "Hey man, let's just go ahead and put that out there, make that episode one." And I was like, "You sure, dog?" And we just said, "Okay." And there it is. So again, go back and listen to it. And kind of the cool thing, which I'll go into more later about this as well, just the growth that came from that show. Um, but also two fun key points about that episode, folks. Two fun key points that Terrence loves. One, amazingly enough, it's the only show we've had that's been less than an hour. It's close. Yeah, not that our shows are really that long, but I found that funny. That's the only show that's been less than an hour. But I think there's a reason for that too. But the other thing that's cool about this, and folks, listen to this. This is a trivia fact for the show. Cowboy Bros trivia. Episode one is the only episode in which Terrence is not acting as the lead host. That's right, folks. In episode one, go back in. I'm the one that actually opens the show to all the segments. Everybody's all used to Terrence opening the show, but by design, we both agreed that that's the role that best fits Terrence for the show. And folks, he does a good job of that. No cap. Um, but yeah, so for me, that's my favorite episode. I got other answers for moments and segments that I definitely want to talk about. But for you, what kind of stands out for you for the first year when it comes to favorite episodes, favorite segments, favorite moments?
One segment or one one show that really stands out to me is Ratchet Reopening. Number one, Jason and I spend probably more time than we should uh, bandying about back and forth about what should episode show titles be. And for those in the know, I'm a big fan of alliteration. And it was just timely because it was when the economy was starting to reopen. And of course, it was also when there was a lot of ratchet stuff happening. For example, you could tell nobody had actually been out in public in a while because some of these fans at events were just losing their shit, like throwing stuff at NBA players and stuff. And I just thought, ratchet reopening. I'm like, yeah, we're going to reopen stuff, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of absurd behaviors because, frankly, no one had been around uh, a crowd that size in well over 2 years. And so, to me, it was the perfect title because it encapsulated perfectly what we were experiencing in real life. Um, I also think another episode, I Am Karen, Hear Me Roar, because it was a big discussion about CDC masking guidelines, which is ironic because we're just coming up on some travel mask updates on that, literally a year later. And so, yeah, it was stuff like that that really, once we got into, okay, here's what we're going to name shows, and here's the flow of segments. And once we really started to, once we actually had like an actual script for the opening and for the closing of the show, those are my favorite moments because that's when I feel like, okay, now we actually have a show. Jason and I, when we discussed potentially doing a podcast in March of the previous year, my first thought was we had an idea, we had a wish, we didn't actually have a show, and now we have a show because we, you know, it it actually has a skeleton now and it has a soul now and we made it our own. And so to me that is what makes the show tick. And that forced us to confront, like, hey, are there certain things that we can't talk about on the show? And if so, why not? Is it because that, for political reasons? Is it because we're not comfortable confronting things? I mean, hell, I never thought in a million years that I'd feel so emboldened to come up with a title for a show, Critical Race Theory Bingo.
Yeah, you did that pretty easy, bro. You came up with that one pretty easy. And I will say real quick, before I let you get back in it, I told you the other day that I never heard anybody at that point uh, call it critical race theory bingo. And ever since then, whenever I heard somebody mention, like on TV or whatever, in person, say critical race theory, I'm always expecting to say critical race theory bingo because that title is so funny to me. It's so funny, but appropriate as well. So like the other day, I heard somebody mention it, and they said critical race theory, and I found myself like going
Bingo.
like bingo, say it. But 'cause I think that's what it's supposed to be, critical race theory bingo, not just critical race theory. So you're on point with that, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's when I knew that, one, I could be clever and I could use real things that people were dealing with. I mean, the whole idea is preposterous. People are worried that, well, critical race theory is affecting my kindergartner. I'm like, you're full of shit. Like, get off of Fox News, get off of Newsmax. you know, it was about, what people were going to study to potentially be teachers one day in college. So the whole premise is bullshit anyway. But actually giving it an absurd title really made people, to me, and it made myself say, hey, this is a laughable premise. And these people are just checking a box and they're not operating in good faith. And to me, putting a title on it like Critical Race Theory Bingo pretty much said, yeah, this isn't to be treated as something that's serious. It's literally to be treated as a fucking bingo game at your local senior citizens home. And that's the only way you could ever truly feel that it was important. Yeah, I would say other profiles and stupidity. Just because we that was the baby episode. Because For those in the know, the baby unfortunately talked himself out of quite a bit of money because he had a tirade on stage. And I like to have a play on words on occasion, and I think about sometimes you've heard about profiles in courage. Well, in his case, it was a profile in stupidity because he literally fucked up a lot of money, unnecessarily just commenting on something that had nothing to do with him. So yeah, these are a lot of my favorite, uh, my favorite segments as we've been at this well over a year. Uh, Another one that I was a really big fan of, cosplay insurrection enthusiasts. That was a
Were you a fan of that segment of the title?
uh, one, both, but two. Anytime I can make fun of people that are being assholes, I will do it, and I use both that segment. Um, and also the opportunity for that January 6th rally to effectively say, okay, these people are cosplay insurrection enthusiasts. And, you know, and it was no shade to people that actually do cosplay, but it was absolutely shade to people that were talking tough on January 6th or talking tough in support after people, quote unquote, fucked around and found out. So, yeah, I think that's really when we were hitting our stride because we were just outright lampooning people who, the guy that actually was a president of a company in Illinois, and he literally was removed from the company after they found out he was at the January 6th assault on the Capitol. So, yeah, another one, Oregon Trail blackface. I mean, this is when we you can tell as we moved into the fall, we got way more comfortable, and the episode titles, yes, got really extra.
Well, not only with the titles too, but I agree with you, but also the subject matter too. It feels like not that we really cared a whole lot in the first, in the beginning, because again, we weren't afraid to talk about hard topics. Even starting back with episode one, talking about the Indianapolis FedEx shooting and talking that. But even as we went on, I feel like we got even more in depth when it comes to what we're not afraid to talk about. And I agree with you, getting to that point in the fall, once we got, 30 something episodes in at that point, or actually not even that far, like 25 episodes in, we just didn't really care anymore. And I shouldn't say we didn't care, but we just weren't afraid to talk about tough stuff anymore because I think at that point we realized, hey, this is our show. We have a show. Let's make it something. So I definitely agree with you on that for sure. Um, I do want to just make a point real quick here, just so people can kind of go back and listen to it if they want to. Terrence made references to episodes 7, 8, 14, 17, and also some further out as well. But definitely, folks, as we reference these, definitely go back and check them out. They're very interesting as well. Um, I do have to say, um, Mr. Terrence, that when it comes to my favorite segments in particular, um, I had to mention episode 16, COVID Palooza, talking about the COVID, the Lollapalooza segment. The last 18 minutes of that segment, look back on it's my favorite. So I'd say, obviously, anybody who listens to the show knows we don't always agree on stuff, and probably most of the time we don't. But that was the one point that our disagreement, I think you might agree, got a little heated, to say the least. Um, Yeah, exactly. So definitely got heated, but in a good way. But it's funny to me also too, not the fact we got heated, but if you listen, even just the last 18 minutes, a lot of stuff we might have been saying might have been true for that given moment, but the way COVID played out turned out to make it true even a month later. In particular, like for example, we were talking about, you know, whether or not they should have had a lot of Palooza because again, this was back in August, and as people can remember, we're obviously still in the pandemic. I think Omicron was still floating around, or whatever, or coming, whatever, or Delta rather, whatever. But basically, one thing Terrence said, and again, not trying to call him out or anything, because at the time I get it, is that I'll put it out there. Maybe certain events should only be held for people who are vaccinated. And yeah, and rightfully so. Terrence at the time, kind of came back at me about that, like saying that that won't happen or shouldn't happen or is ridiculous. Then, as we all know now, a lot of cities around the country, maybe some months later, decided that hey, you can't come in our facility without showing proof of vaccination. So that really actually became the case. Now, I will say, much to my surprise, I kind of had to agree. A point in time, I didn't think it would happen either. So, but that 18 minutes, folks, if I would definitely listen to all the episodes, all the segments. But if you listen to one episode reference in this show, listen to that COVID Palooza um, segment. Like it's in episode 16. But that definitely is my favorite moment because, for one, the content of the segment, but then also the fact that obviously, we had that one disagreement that obviously the whole world can hear now. Um, but the fact that but it's a disagreement. Obviously, we still have the show, so it didn't kill the show or anything like that. But we were talking about a real subject that mattered. Even though it was about Lollapalooza, but still. So that's what I liked about that. We can disagree on the show, even to the point of getting heated, but we still came back. Not even next week. We still had to record the outro for that show, so we were able to squash what happened in segment 3 and jump right into the outro and be fine. So, so I'd say that's my favorite segment. When it comes to my favorite moment per se, I'd have to say that I can't really pick out a moment, but kind of what you referenced when it comes to the fact that we created like a scripted intro and outro for the show, kind of goes to this. It's kind of just seeing the show grow. I mentioned obviously episode 1 is my favorite episode, but folks, if you go back and listen to episode 1, like I recommended, to even just listen to episode 1, you can see the huge difference in the show from episode 1 to where we're at now for episode 53 in many different aspects. But when you listen to episode 1 and episode 2, you start seeing the stark difference of our growth from episode 1 to 2. Same thing from 2 to 3, and 3 to 4, and 4 to 5, and then 5 to 6. And I really think personally, I said this back like we were at episode 20, that episode 5 and 6 like really, you can really see the point of okay, these guys get it now. They get it. And I definitely challenge anybody to go back and listen to those first 5 episodes, maybe first 6, and you can see what I'm talking about. It's that difference. I just feel like listen to those 6 episodes, that 5, 6 episode range is when we really started to get it. And I don't know if you've ever thought about that before. It may take people actually going back to listen to it, but I was able to notice it just listening to episode 1 and 2. Even just small stuff we learned. Hey, maybe we should add this for episode 2. Oh, okay, cool. Let's try a different episode 3, and then same thing for 4, 5, and 6, and probably the same thing going forward as well. A lot of other cases, but I really noticed it in those first 5, 6 episodes. So, um, for lack of a better term or whatnot, I'd say that is my favorite moment. Just noticing that growth of the show and noticing the point in which I can say we got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's really funny, and I don't even have to listen to the episode, but I know how we sounded in episode alpha, and I know how we sound now. And even, and hell, there's a good chance you're going to piss me off with something tonight, Jason. I know that it still will make for a good show because our hearts are in the right place, and we found out a way to, even when we don't agree, that, and I think the rest of the world could probably learn a thing or two about this, basically not take your ball and go home, so to speak. This person doesn't agree with me 110%.
Well, I mean, we're not CNN or anything. We don't have to become enemies over this. Obviously, we the goal is not to become enemies. We still want to keep doing the show. Uh, so I know we always joke around and say that the show's going to end at some point over creative differences. Um, Again, I say that jokingly, and obviously, that's another thing. And obviously, when and it's like, again, I know I keep mentioning episode 1 because it is my favorite, but And I also want to point out something else. You mentioned earlier that when we talked about doing the show back in like March of 21,
Hmm.
actually no, it wasn't even that long ago. So episode one was released on April 22nd. We really didn't take that much time between us first, like me first reached out to you to to ask you about podcasting and had you thought about doing it. That
Yeah.
actually happened in April still. So from the time in which I reached out to you, which I think was like on a weekend or a Monday, I feel like not that next Tuesday, a few days later, but the Tuesday after that, or whatever day that was, that's when we recorded that episode. It wasn't that long. It might have been a matter of from the time I reached out to you to the time we actually recorded that was definitely less than 2 weeks. So, and that's another cool thing too, is that, and I even mentioned this in episode one, the first segment, is that when I reached out to you about about the podcast, and I was really just asking initially, had you ever thought about doing it? Because hey, I need to know how to start this because I want to do it, right?
Hmm.
And then obviously you mentioned that you had, and I think you initiated a phone call as as you like to do apparently.
I do
Uh,
that. Totally do that.
Terrence is that person you're talking to or texting, and all of a sudden they try to call you randomly out the blue. That's Terrence. But no. But yeah, so we initiated the phone call and started talking, and then we both realized that obviously we were both interested in doing a podcast. And then at least I thought that, well, if you're going to do a podcast, it's probably better to do it with two people because that way it's more like a conversation as opposed to just one guy ranting and talking. And that's another, and to me, and also, folks, I want to say this. I want to say thank you to all the people that have said this to me, and it's been a lot. That the one thing I like the most about what we do is that the one, I guess, positive feedback we always get, they say, is that whenever we listen to your show, we can tell it's really just two guys talking and having the same conversations they would have if we weren't listening to it, like at a bar or something like that. And to me, that's the biggest compliment because that's kind of what I want. Now, it might have been not been the case or thought when we first started this, but going into it, that's a good thing. So again, I'm glad we can come off that way. Hopefully, when people listen, they get that. But I really do think that's a good thing because really just you and me talking, boy. Now, yeah, I said boy. Um, yeah, it's really just me and you talking. That's really all it is, and I think that's partially why we can have our disagreements, even like in episode 16, and it's not a big deal because you're not just my co-host, you're my boy. 30 years deep, 30 years plus deep. So actually, 30 years this year. So yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. I think, for me, um, my favorite moments are we've been able to truly wave wade into the pool of like controversial stuff, but also manage to keep it lighthearted. Because especially when you had so many crazy heavy hitting topics, I mean, you're talking about Ukraine Russian conflict, you're talking about people, mass shootings. Um, to be able to discuss these things in a nuanced way, to at least initiate dialogue and respectfully disagree. That is something that honestly is probably missing from a significant portion of society in the first damn place. And I felt like, hey, if I can at least do this with my best friend of 30 years, maybe there is hope for the for the rest of the universe.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned all the hard topics we talked about, and I was kind of scrolling through episode titles, see if I can remember what's really kind of the hardest one we talked about, or what's one subject that I am very surprised we wound up talking about because probably in no other circles what some of probably no other circles would I actually talk about some of this stuff with anybody. But yeah, for the glory of the podcast, I guess we did like in particular. I never thought I'd be speaking publicly about abortion, but yet in episode 22, and probably more than that, but in episode 22, we talked about it with the state bills in Texas. And bro, it's really funny to look back on some of this stuff because well, another thing about that because that was back in episode 22, and it does not seem like that was 30 episodes ago when we talked about that. isn't that crazy, bro? Some of this stuff was 30 episodes. Well, hell, I guess some stuff we talked about was 50 something episodes ago. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, but the thing about we talked about that topic, it doesn't seem like it's been 30 episodes ago, but yet it has. So yeah, man, that's really cool that we've done all this stuff and look forward to year two.
Yeah, man. I think we have pushed ourselves and each other quite a bit the last 300 plus days. So it's been a hell of a ride.
Keep
All right.
pushing.
Yes, sir. All right. That concludes our first segment on some of our favorite segments and moments of year one of CPB. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a lot of what we learned on Cowpark Brothers.